All right, good day, everyone. I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm not going to be doing a Bible study. I'm going to be talking about my journey. I'm going to be talking about when I was diagnosed with diabetes. It's like 6, 7 years ago. At that time, it was a real crisis. And I'm going to tell you my journey and what I did to reverse it. And I'm going to do so right up front telling you that I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm just a guy. This has been what worked for me. I'm going to give you a whole lot of little tidbits, information. You check it all out on your own. You decide what you should do and what the Lord wants you to do. Everybody's body is different. I've got my green tea. I'm just going to talk a little bit. And by the way, do you know what green tea is? Green tea is tea that is not as processed. It's green because it's in its natural form. The Lipton tea that you buy, or whatever brand it might be, the brown is because it has been exposed to the air and oxidized more, and hence a lot of the reason why green tea is healthier. It tastes like tea, only it's better for you. But if you start drinking green tea to try to lose weight, it has a very minimal, if any, effect according to the research. But it has other effects beyond that. So, I was diagnosed with diabetes, having been in the ministry for decades, having ministered to a lot of people who I knew what diabetes would do to your body. I knew that it was a big deal. And if you have been diagnosed with diabetes and you have not taken it to be a big deal, it is a life-threatening disease. You need to take it serious. You need to take some steps. There are things you can do. First thing the doctor did for me was put me on Metformin. That's standard procedure. I didn't know what to eat until I had researched it fully. And so I went 6 weeks and was already unhealthy, but the metformin played into, don't know that it would cause it, but it played into, I think, heavily. I developed a perforated bowel, had emergency surgery. That actually turned out to be a wonderful blessing, because it turns out that I found that everything that the experts were saying at that time about diabetes was backwards. It was all wrong. I began to investigate what to do about diabetes and whether there was any solutions. I found that there actually was. And so there was a guy in England, and he was thin, developed diabetes, and he had some connections in research, and he found out they had been looking and discovered, excuse me, that there are a couple of things that will reverse diabetes. And you got to remember, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, you ask a doctor, can you reverse diabetes? No, it's not reversible. Turns out that's not what they say anymore, because the research proves that's not true. So this guy in England discovered that there was 2 ways that you could reverse diabetes. One was bariatric surgery, where they go in and they make your stomach smaller so you can't eat as much, and so you stop consuming the amount of food that you had. That reversed diabetes in a matter of weeks. The other way was to put yourself on a diet, basically of no food. So not too many people can do that, although some people do it as a matter of fasting. But anyway, they discovered in the research that 6 weeks of that kind of a diet, basically a starvation diet, reversed diabetes just like the surgery did, the bariatric surgery. So I went for the weeks after my emergency surgery, not eating because of the obvious reasons much, and in the process also searching for what works. And I've discovered this about it. So the information that doctors were giving at that time, I don't know what they're telling you now. I've stopped talking to my doctor about it because he says I'm going to kill myself. and that what I'm trying to do won't work. It turns out the evidence is contrary to that. So diabetes can be reversed, and it can be backwards. Doctors at that time said that diabetes was progressive and not reversible, that you should prick your finger a couple of times a week and just kind of keep your finger, so to speak, on it. That's upside down. That is all wrong. In fact, now the raging thing is a continuous glucose monitor where you stick something on your arm or wherever you stick it, and it continuously monitors your blood sugar. Well, I did that in a poor man's way. I did that by pricking myself on my finger before a meal to find out what my base was and where I was at physically. Your baseline should be somewhere around 100 or less. A normal person is going to be in the 90s. Somebody pre-diabetic is going to be just above 100. And then what they don't tell you that you should do, and the poor man's way of a continuous blood glucose monitor, is at an hour or an hour and a half after you have eaten a meal, check your blood. Find out, because at an hour to an hour and a half is when you have peaked. Again, 15, 20 minutes later, prick your finger again, because you need to know if your blood sugar is going down. So say at an hour, my blood sugar is 120. Well, that's okay, because the threshold is 140, according to the experts. If I'm at 120 an hour after I eat, that's good. But I need to know that I have reached my peak and I'm not still going up. For example, if you eat pasta or if you eat pizza, those things are notorious for taking 2 and 3 hours to peak. So you need to find out after an hour and a half if you're on your way down. If you don't do that, you don't know anything. If at an hour I'm good, 10, 15 minutes later I'm better and it's going down, then I know, if it's not going down, to go exercise, to go do something. And it turns out it not really needs to be strenuous exercise, a simple walk, any kind of moving around, doing something, being up, not sitting on your butt. So then after just 2 or 3 minutes of that, come back and check your blood again, and it should be beginning to go down. If not, you may have a problem, and there are certain circumstances and situations, when we'll talk about that as we go along, that it's not going to go down. It's going to stay up, and it's going to do whatever damage it's going to do, and there's some reasons for that. So the American Diabetes Association is the worst place in the world, in my humble opinion, to get any advice on what to do about your diabetes, because they give awful advice and they're completely upside down. They will give you advice that will be deadly. The American Diabetes Association should be where you get good information, but unless they've changed, it's awful. So blood glucose after a meal at a couple of hours should be below 140. That's kind of the threshold and the standard. Anything above 140 for long periods of time, it begins to do organ damage. If it stays above 140 or above, you're doing damage to your organ. It takes decades for the kind of damage that it's done or is doing for your organs to become unable to deal with the sugar that you put in your system by eating. So everything you eat breaks down, pretty much everything you eat breaks down into sugar. And your system has to deal with it. Your pancreas, your liver has to kick in and do things in the right order, in the right way. And for a diabetic, that does not happen properly. And of course, there's 2 different kinds of diabetic. There's type 1 diabetic and type 2. Type 1 diabetic, they can often be born that way. Their pancreas does not make insulin, and so they have to take insulin shots. They have to do the job of their insulin, basically, and they have to monitor that and get it at the right level depending on what they've eaten and so forth. A type 2 diabetic, they have, generally speaking, they are people like me who went decades upon decades, not weeks and years, decades upon decades of eating pie and donuts and pasta and drinking Coke, inserting sugar into your system. Decades of that, with your blood sugar staying high, does damage to your organs. And finally, you reach a point where your pancreas and your liver can't deal with it. And you move into the area of being a type 2 diabetic. And by that time, you better do something. The good news is you can. I did. So very often doctors will prescribe insulin for somebody when they can't get their blood sugars under control. That's generally not a good idea. That's bad advice. That's all they've got. So they have discovered, and this is fairly recent, that high levels of insulin in your body is as damaging to your organs and your systems as high blood glucose or sugar. Now, isn't that interesting? So therefore, taking insulin is not as effective as something you can do to reverse type 2 diabetic. Even for people that are type 1 diabetic and have to give themselves insulin, if you'll do what I'm going to suggest you do, what I did and what worked for me, you will be able to reduce the amount of insulin you have to put in your system. And by the way, I have to say at this point, before we go any further, you ought to mark this down. And I'm not bragging on myself at all. It's a simple matter of fact. I have been able to be disciplined, to rigorously follow the rules. Most people will not do that. Most people just will not think about it, and they will not be disciplined enough to do the things I'm going to talk about to deal with their diabetic problem. So here's what you do. Type 1, type 2, go on a low-carb diet. Absolutely, I'm a believer in low carb. Low carb, I think, may have prolonged my life by decades. So the way I found I was able to not only lose a great deal of weight, but to reverse my diabetes, which I did, was to go on a diet where I did not eat the carbs. So here's the point you need to know. There are, of everything that you can eat, everything that you ingest, they are either a carb, a protein, or they are a fat. Carb, protein, fat. Those are the three things that's in every food that you eat. There is fiber, but that's a whole other thing. That doesn't increase your blood sugar at all. So protein, carbs, and fat are the things you need to watch. So the diet that I went on, that I was able to move from about 205 pounds, depending on when you start the process of analyzing it, I was at 205, 210. Sometimes I hit 215, but usually 205 to 210. And I've dropped it down to, today, I'm at 160. And I dropped most of those pounds in the first half year after I started this process. Happened very quickly and reversed my diabetes. And they said at that time, I don't know what they're saying now, that it's a myth that you can shrink your stomach. I'm not sure that's a myth. I think there is something to that because most of the time, most people, they're going to eat until they're gorged. I think you can shrink it somewhat, and you can certainly, absolutely shrink the number, the amount of food that you eat until you feel satisfied. And that's the key. That's the reason why the GLP-1s, Ozempic type things, some people can't stay on those because they won't stop eating. The GLP-1s, like Ozempic, they cause your system to be such that when you eat, it kind of makes you sick. and it takes away your appetite. I was just listening today, and they were talking about how this is the nationwide obsession now with GLP-1s is affecting the restaurant business. People are eating an entree, or they're eating an appetizer instead of an entree, and that's causing them to have a financial issue in restaurants. At any rate, that's what GLP-1s do. They reduce your appetite, and so you don't want to eat as much. And people who will not discipline themselves to say, okay, I'm not going to eat. I don't feel like eating. Because they're in the habit of gorging that donut, drinking that Coke. They can't discipline themselves, and so they get sicker, and they feel sicker. It will make you sick. And so they go off the GLP-1s. So you can reverse diabetes. Low carb. Don't worry about the protein. Don't worry about the fat. Okay, now let that sink in. How upside down is that compared to what we've been told all my life? The food pyramid is absolutely inverted. You start eating protein, you start eating fat. Fat is your friend. It will cause, if you'll stop eating the carbs, you'll lose weight and you'll become healthy. Okay, this is a huge debate. This is where I'm coming from. This has been my experience. So I dropped from 205 to 160. I shrunk my stomach, whatever that means. So the basic things you need to stay away from are pretty simple. White bread. And by the way, here at this point, I want to put to you a note that you need to take. There is a product that you can buy called Unbelievabuns, all one word, Unbelievabuns. Do a search for that, and you'll discover their website where you can buy bread, and it is high gluten bread, so you may not be able to tolerate it, but absolutely, I can eat a sandwich with that high gluten bread, Unbelievabun bread. They make buns and other items as well. It has no effect on my blood sugar. Zero. I can take a piece of it and I can eat a piece of that bread and check my blood 15, 20 minutes later. It's had zero effect. It's given me back sandwiches. Okay. So you can't eat white bread if you want to reverse your diabetes. You don't want to eat bread at all. And that's for maybe another time. But even so-called good bread, brown bread, it's not good for you. It's not good for your blood sugar. So white bread, white rice, even the brown rice, not good for you. Not good for brown. The brown rice is not good for your blood sugar. Slightly better than white rice, but brown rice is only slightly better. If you eat brown rice as a part of your diet ongoing, you're not going to reverse your diabetes. And then, of course, potatoes, but there's a fix for that. I have a tip for you. Listen to the end. So some things are promoted as being really good, and I tried these thinking, wow, this is going to be great. Quinoa, spelled Q-I-Q-U-I-N-O-A. Quinoa. It tastes really good, but it is not low carb, and it is not good for your blood sugar and won't help at all. Also, before I go to bed at night, I drink a couple of tablespoons of apple cider vinegar mixed in a glass of water. You can't take it straight. I've actually seen some people on the web doing podcasts that they will do a test and they will show you what it does to their blood, and they'll drink 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. And you can tell by the look on their face that it is absolutely burning. The acid is burning. Don't do that. Mix it in a glass of water and drink it before you go to bed at night. It has a slight effect, not no effect, not a great effect, but a slight effect on your fasting blood sugar in the morning. So you can search the web for the carbs that are in food. You can also get an app you can put on your phone, and it's great. There are several of them. You can get those apps And don't worry about the high glycemic or low glycemic effect. Just pay attention to the carbs. And so there's a couple of natural products that I have discovered when I've rendered everything I've tried, all the tips and tricks that's on the web. Most of them did not work for me. But I did discover two things. Berberine, spelled Berberine. Berberine. But you have to be careful because a lot of the stuff that you buy on Amazon, it does not have as much in it as it's supposed to. So you have to, and you can do some searches for some people who have actually checked out the amount that in the different brands you need to use an approved brand. Berberine and bergamot, spelled Bergamot. Bergamot. There is a brand I think called Bergamet, which is kind of an original, bergamot or bergamet. Take that 15 minutes before a meal, and it has essentially, in my body, it had the effect of metformin on reducing the blood sugar. Now, it does not cure blood sugar problem. It does not cure your diabetes. You're going to have to do the diet. You're going to have to do the exercise. You're going to have to eat right. All three of those things are going to have to happen or you won't reverse it. You can't medicate yourself out of diabetes with prescription medications or bergamot and berberine. You can't take medications, natural or otherwise, which, by the way, metformin was a natural substance that they turned into a medicine. So there's that. You can't just take berberine and fix your blood sugar problem. You're going to have to eat low carb. You're going to have to stop worrying about the fat and stop worrying about the protein. But you can have the effect of, and metformin only has about 5 or 10, even metformin only has about 5 or 10% effect on your blood sugar. But 5 or 10% is enough to be significant and help. So if you take the berberine, does for you what metformin does in a natural way that does not have the side effects that for me, I think contributed to a perforated bowel. That's just me. So take the berberine, the bergamot, 15 minutes before a meal, and it will blunt the influence of the digestive process, just like metformin does. And it's been called nature's metformin, but then metformin is natural substance as well. So you got to do that. You got to take the berberine or the bergamot. Exercise after a meal, and it doesn't make any difference what you do. Turns out, I've experimented with it. Doesn't make any difference what you do. Whether you go get on the exercise machines, and I've done that, and after 2 minutes, it drops like a rock. But you can do the same thing by taking a walk or just being up, cleaning the house, vacuuming, doing whatever so long as you're up, moving about, after a meal, you will reduce the blood sugar impact. Now, let me give you some tips on what to eat. These are things I have found work. There's literally thousands of tips out there you'll find on YouTube for things about eating that are tips and tricks. Most of them do not work, and certainly they didn't work for me. Here's the best I've found. Something called hemp hearts. Hemp hearts, the heart of the hemp, and there is nothing about it that will make you high. There is no, it's not a drug thing like marijuana. But you can buy hemp hearts. It is really high in protein, and you can mix that with whatever foods you're eating, like mashed potatoes, and that protein, whatever protein you put in there, neutralizes the carbs you have in there, almost to a 1-to-1 thing. So hemp hearts, huge. I live with hemp hearts at almost every meal. High protein, blunts the carbs. All right, next, and this is just me, I can tell you if I sit down and eat a steak red meat until I am pleasantly full. After an hour, my blood sugar is A-OK. It's protein. Don't worry about the protein. Don't eat the carbs. Red meat. Turns out that somebody who is a dear friend of mine, who is also a plant-based person, and this person has told me that there's actually been some research done, and they found that whether your body does well with red meat or whether your body does better with plant-based may have a great deal to do with your blood type. I find that fascinating. At any rate, red meat is my friend. Let's see. So another little tip. Cabbage, which is great for you in all kinds of ways, but you can take cabbage and you can dice it up just as small as you can. Really work at it. Dice it as small as you can. Cook it in a microwave just a little bit till it's not still tough. Just cook it a little bit. Mix it with your mashed potatoes. The rule is never eat what they call naked carbs. Naked carbs would be a piece of white bread. If you're going to eat a piece of white bread, put some peanut butter on it. That's not the answer, but the peanut butter is protein and it will blunt that effect a little bit. So take the cabbage, dice it up, mix it with your mashed potatoes, 25, 30%, up to 50%, or however much you want to. There's no rule on it. You basically can't taste it, and there's no real texture to it if you dice it small, and it will neutralize almost 1-to-1 what the potatoes do. So when I eat mashed potatoes, and I had some today, you mix it with hemp hearts and diced up cabbage, and you can have your mashed potatoes. So also there's been quite a bit of research done on fiber. I had diverticulitis a few years ago, and what they were telling me back then, the expert, have you come to the place where you realize that the experts generally don't know what they're talking about? Well, this expert, for which I spent a lot of money on, told me, the best thing we can tell you right now is the only thing we can really tell you right now for diverticulitis. Don't eat seeds or popcorn, and take a little bit of fiber every night. Sometime during the day, take a tablespoon or so, tablespoon of fiber mixed in a lot of water. So this is a huge debate online. The carnivores and low-carb people will tell you that's bad advice. The fiber does not help with constipation. Now, so here they have now further discovered that eating popcorn and seeds does not have any effect on diverticulitis. If you've got diverticulitis, I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm telling you that the research I found, and I have experienced as well, you don't need to worry about the seeds. In fact, one of my breakfasts, so I basically have 3 breakfasts as a pre-diabetic. I eat as if I'm diabetic. I'll eat eggs and bacon. And I have my wife mix the scrambled eggs with hemp hearts and some other things as well. But eggs and bacon is one of my breakfasts. Another is a cereal, only it's not cereal. It's a cereal that's made up strictly of seeds and nuts. Maybe another time, perhaps I can put below in the comments, if any of you are interested, I can put the name of that so-called cereal. It's not cereal, it's seeds and nuts, but it tastes fantastic and doesn't have any effect on my blood sugar. So I have eggs and bacon, I have this so-called cereal, and then I discovered that I can have what used to be one of my favorite breakfasts, malto meal. Now, malto meal in and of itself is not good for a diabetic. But if you take the malto meal, I discovered if I mix the hemp hearts in with it, about a 50-50 ratio almost, I can enjoy my malto meal and it doesn't affect my blood sugar. So those are my 3 go-to breakfasts. Another couple of little tidbits before I end this. So there are, and this is what I promised you, not only these tips, but here's a truth. On rare occasions, I have found that my blood sugar will spike, get up to 140. That's a spike for me. If it gets above 140, I get real freaked out. And I have not been able to get it down. After an hour and a half, even up to 2 hours, it stays up there, 130, 140. It is after I have eaten a meal out, and my gut tells me, I could be all wrong about this, but I don't know anything else that explains it. There has been some food additive, food enhancer, that has been put in that food that was prepared that had an effect on my body that my blood sugar didn't come down. Rare. Happens to me maybe 4 times a year. This is the reason why I know it's not a normal thing that I eat, and I can kind of tell. So food additives are very bad. Second, and I think it's tied to that, is Chinese food. There is no food, I don't think even Italian food is worse for you than Chinese food in its pure form. I eat at a Chinese restaurant, but I don't eat your standard Chinese food, and I certainly don't eat the rice. There are some other things that maybe I can share a future podcast for which Judy and I are able to go out and eat Chinese food once in a while. And I'm able to prepare myself, taking the berberine, not eating the rice, and knowing the right things to eat, and I can enjoy that. Now, discipline. One more tip I just thought of. It's a bonus. Maybe you've heard about it, maybe you haven't. It's become a thing. If you search for it, you'll find out it's become, in the last couple of years, a real thing. Red light therapy. Red light therapy is where you take a panel that you buy that puts off red light, and you shine that on your body. Those will you shouldn't buy one of those unless you buy one that also puts off near infrared light. The red light is just good for the surface, and I don't care much about that. It's supposed to reduce my complexion by 10 years. I don't care about the red light. It comes along with it, so I shine it. But the near infrared light penetrates deeply, all the way even into the skull, into the brain. They discovered this way back in the late 1800s. Doctors actually did in Europe, that near infrared light accelerated wound healing. You get a cut, you shine near infrared light on that every day, and it accelerates. I've actually found that to be true when I have injured myself with a cut. I know how long it takes for my body to heal from most of those things, and I have tested the near infrared light, and it accelerates it at least by 50%. Other things near infrared light does. It has also almost basically healed my ankles. I had ankle surgery, both ankles, had lots of problems from that, lots of pain, lots of swelling. The near infrared light, 15, 20 minutes every morning, and I have eliminated the ankle pain from my life. It's been wonderful. Also, if you have neuropathy, nerve neuropathy from diabetes, or just naturally, if you have neuropathy, that is where the nerves are dying, that's what happens to diabetic. The extremities, usually the toes and the feet, will begin to die. The nerve endings die, and you have prickly, awful pain. Near infrared light will reverse that, because they found that near infrared light also stimulates nerve growth. Bell's palsy. I have a neighbor who got Bell's palsy. I put her onto the near infrared light, and it began to reverse. It won't do it in a day or two. You have to do it every day. It won't do it in a week. But over a period of months, you can make the pain go away and the nerve endings will grow again. It also, they have found in the research, actual research recently, like in the last year, that near infrared and red light shined on a person 15 minutes before they eat reduces the glycemic impact of the food that they eat. It's not a fix. It's a percentage help. Most people don't have the temperament or the discipline to do these things, but if you will do them, you can reverse these things and get your life back.